This is the annual child safeguarding training required by SCIS policy. SCIS has adopted two policies specific to the ongoing safeguarding and protection of students. One is the child safeguarding policy, and the other is the recently adopted suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention policy. This presentation will review components of each of these policies and the responsibilities of all adults working with or around students at SCIS. It is important for everyone to know that SCIS has a child safeguarding policy. It includes the roles and responsibility of all faculty, staff, and volunteers at SCIS, defines abuse and neglect, contains tips and procedures for handling disclosures, and reporting suspected cases of child protection concerns. The policy includes a safeguarding report form to use when reporting concerns. It also includes the SCIS Code of Conduct outlining expectations for safe and appropriate interaction with students. As an adult working with students at SCIS, it is your responsibility to be aware of behaviors or statements that cause you to suspect a child's physical or emotional safety may be at risk. It is also your responsibility to report these suspicions in a timely manner. Suspicions of child protection concerns should be shared only with designated people. It is important to maintain confidentiality to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. All adults working with students are required to read and sign the SCIS Code of Conduct annually. The Code of Conduct outlines specific behaviors and practices designed to establish appropriate boundaries and promote a culture of safety and respect. Finally, every 3 years, SCIS faculty must complete a comprehensive safeguarding course provided by the school. You will be contacted when it is your time to refresh your training. 30 years ago, world leaders made a historic commitment to the world's children by adopting the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, an international agreement on childhood. It became the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history and has helped transform children's lives around the world. Our host country, China, is one of the countries to have ratified the convention. We live and work in a cultural context that has its own history, traditions, and beliefs about children. It is important we are aware of how our own biases and background influence our beliefs while being sensitive and empathetic to those that may be different than us. We have a responsibility to understand and respect those differences when confronted with the challenges related to abuse and/or neglect. That being said, SCIS and its employees abide by the laws of China and follow those established rules as it relates to child protection concerns. When our concerns about a child are not in violation of the laws of China, our response is to partner with families and caregivers in a way that supports the student and focuses on changing behavior. There are 4 types of abuse we should be aware of and vigilant in identifying: physical, emotional, sexual abuse, and neglect. Types of abuse can occur as a combination. The signs and symptoms of abuse may be subtle and hard to recognize. Physical abuse signs may be unexplained bruising or injuries, explanations for the injuries that don't make sense or occur too often. Some students may attempt to hide bruising or injuries with clothing. Signs of emotional or psychological abuse may be overreaction to mistakes or fears that seem out of proportion to the situation. Some students may demonstrate attention-seeking behaviors as a result of emotional abuse. Signs of sexual abuse may manifest in the knowledge about sexuality that is developmentally inappropriate for a student's age, or a student engaging in relationships that appear to lack boundaries. Neglect can be the absence of regular and nurturing care, including regular access to meals, adherence to hygiene or sleep routines. Neglect may also be when students do not have regular and meaningful interaction with a parent or guardian who can provide encouragement, mentorship, and comfort. The onset of abuse may also result in significant and noticeable changes in a student's behavior or demeanor. As adults who care about kids, it's our responsibility to watch for these signs and symptoms and report any suspicions of physical, emotional, sexual abuse, or neglect. If a student discloses abuse to you, that student has chosen to tell you their secret and trusts you. Never forget how hard it is for him or her to tell someone about abuse. It's hard to hear your student has been abused, and your initial reaction may be to minimize or not believe, but it is important to support the student. How you communicate, verbally and nonverbally, is important. When handling suspected abuse concerns, take a moment to be mindful of your body language and facial expressions. Be calm, supportive, and not overly emotional. Find a place that is private and conducive to a confidential conversation. Listen carefully to the student. Do not rush, interrupt, or give advice. When handling disclosure of abuse, your primary focus should be on listening. Listen to the student. Let them explain what happened in his or her own words. Don't stop the student in the middle of their story. Do not question, probe, or investigate further. Your primary responsibility is to get sufficient information, not to interpret. Reassure the student that you are taking their concerns seriously. Limit questioning to getting basic information. What happened? When did it happen? Where did it happen? Who was there? Don't ask questions that imply the child was at fault or that you are making judgment. Make no promises. Explain that you have a responsibility to communicate suspected abuse and ensure the child that you will continue to respect their privacy and confidentiality. Don't tell the student that you won't tell anyone what they have told you. The student will have fears about what will happen next. So tell them what you're going to do, what is going to happen next, and who else they will need to talk to. This will help the student understand what will happen next. Reassure the student that he or she is not at fault and has done nothing wrong. Be supportive, not judgmental. Even though the student may be disclosing terrible things that may have happened at the hands of a family member or a friend, the child still may love that person and may only be just beginning to recognize that he or she was being abused. Record the disclosure. Take good notes. Focus on the facts. Do not wait to record or communicate your concerns. Document exact quotes. It may be helpful to write down exact quotes of what the student said in the case of involvement of other parties. The SCIS Child Safeguarding Policy outlines the steps in the reporting process. Please take some time to review and familiarize yourself with the flowchart and keep in mind that the most important step that an adult needs to take when faced with the disclosure or suspicion of abuse is to report the incident to the divisional school counselor as quickly as possible. If you are unsure about how to contact the school counselor, ask the divisional secretary. From the perspective of neuroscience, there is a clear neurological relationship between touch and learning, in the sense that touch puts the recipient in a trusting state, which is essential for learning, especially with younger learners. When using physical touch as a way to communicate support, it is crucial to always consider the feelings and needs of the student, the cultural context, and how this physical contact is perceived by others. Teachers protect themselves and their students by being sensitive to the student's unique cultural and family background, as well as the developmental needs, by modeling and reinforcing personal boundaries, asking for the student's consent, and using their best professional judgment in deciding when physical touch might be appropriate. At SCIS, we have developed a code of conduct, which all adults who interact with children are asked to sign annually. As adults, we are responsible for maintaining appropriate physical, emotional, and sexual boundaries. All communication, including physical touch, should be characterized by transparency and safety. If there is a reasonable cause to believe that children are being abused or harmed in any way, it is our moral, ethical, professional, and legal responsibility to intervene appropriately by following the flowchart of reporting on page 11 of the Child Safeguarding Policy. SCIS adopted a suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention policy. It contains information about indicators of risk for suicidal ideation and the protective factors that may help to insulate students against feelings of suicide. The policy includes a teacher training component to increase awareness of indicators of risk and suggestions for interacting with students at risk. It also outlines a plan for assessment, action, and re-entry procedures if a student is out of school due to suicidal ideation or an unsuccessful attempt. The purpose of this policy is to support ongoing mentoring of student well-being and to outline plans for intervention when students are at risk for suicidal ideation. The policy articulates the belief statements and our approach to supporting the social and emotional well-being of our students based on best professional practice. Suicidal warning signs should be taken very seriously. There are some signs that are obvious, such as talking about suicide and dying, but others are much more subtle and can be easily missed. It is important to know the signs, especially for those who have risk factors for suicide. Early detection of warning signs can lead to professional help, and mental health treatment can even save a life. Common indicators of risk include a recent experience of significant loss and resulting grief, changes in physical habits, such as a person suddenly becoming less concerned about their physical appearance, changes in emotion, especially emotional suppression, but also difficulties with emotional regulation, changes in school performance, especially a drop in achievement, as well as direct threats of suicide. In our approach to suicide prevention, we are currently using the LEARN model as a way of identifying and supporting those who might be at risk. For adults working with students, the first two steps of the model are crucial. Look for signs and empathize when a student discloses suicidal ideation. On the left-hand side, you will see a list of specific behaviors that might suggest a student may be at risk, increased risk for suicide. On the right-hand side are some useful guidelines for how to handle a disclosure. Empathize and listen. Offer compassion, not advice. Avoid judgment and accept that a student's perception, no matter how distorted, is their reality. Summarize what you heard and tell the student in a warm and supportive tone of voice that you will share what they have told you with the school counselor, as they are trained to help students who are struggling. The last three steps in the model, asking directly about suicide, removing the dangers, and creating a plan of next steps, fall outside of the scope of intervention by a classroom teacher or substitute. These steps are built into the policy and are implemented by the counselor and the student support team. The most important next step that an adult is expected to take following a disclosure of suicidal ideation by a student is to refer the student to the school counselor on the same day the disclosure is made and to fill out and submit the child safeguarding report form to the school counselor. Ask the divisional secretary if you are unsure how to contact the school counselor. Here is a summary of steps to take and what to avoid when responding to a concern about a student's safety and well-being. This guidance applies to concerns regarding suspected abuse, as well as to concerns about suicidality. If you have a reason to suspect that a student is at risk, complete the child safeguarding report within 24 hours and send the report to the divisional school counselor. The only exception to this protocol is when the concern is about the behavior of a staff member at SCIS. Any concerns regarding SCIS staff are reported directly to the head of school and not to the school counselor. When responding to a concern is not appropriate to conduct an investigation into what happened, if abuse is suspected, do not inform the suspected perpetrator about the concern. Do not talk with your colleagues about the report and do not wait to report. When safeguarding children's health and well-being, time is of the essence. Here is a summary of steps to take and what to avoid when responding to a concern about a student's safety and well-being. This guidance applies to concerns regarding suspected abuse, as well as to concerns about suicidality. If you have a reason to suspect that a student is at risk, complete the child safeguarding report within 24 hours and send the report to the divisional school counselor. The only exception to this protocol is when the concern is about the behavior of a staff member at SCIS. Any concerns regarding SCIS staff are reported directly to the head of school and not to the school counselor. When responding to a concern is not appropriate to conduct an investigation into what happened, if abuse is suspected, do not inform the suspected perpetrator about the concern. Do not talk with your colleagues about the report and do not wait to report. When safeguarding children's health and well-being, time is of the essence.